can't I go on Bonadies? You have that mouse too? Your mouse, Bonadies. Your mouse is actually really weird. Okay, I got it. Okay, now you go on. Okay, go to videos. Have to still press click on that. Okay, now we're starting. Hello and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline Hamden. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Marjorie Bonadies makes Hamden tick. She's the minority leader, right?
Yes, I am.
Of the Hamden Legislative Council.
Good morning.
She has good morning. She has a lot to say about what's going on in the town. She's here to the WNHH studio to tell us about that. Welcome back, Marjorie.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I'm going to ask you to get real close to the mic.
Okay.
And I'm going to thank Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. So, Marjorie, what's it like to be a Republican in Hamden, which has started, at least from a distance, looking a lot more like New Haven as sort of like Democratic Party is the official state religion?
I think that's pretty accurate. We are outnumbered 4-1 on the registration rolls. 16,000 Democrats, 4,000 Republicans.
How many independents?
11,000.
So you're really, you wouldn't argue you're close to even, unless they're all liberals who are independents.
You know, independents will swing different ways in different elections. I think independents swung in 2016, and
for Democrats, right?
No, I think they swung for Republicans.
Oh, in 2016, okay.
Correct. Yes, I think that's why we have a Republican president right now.
Oh, you're talking about nationally.
Nationally.
I'm talking about Hamden.
Yeah, no, that hasn't happened in Hamden, in local.
Actually, because I watched it from the next town over, Marjorie, and it seemed to me like there used to be Republicans winning local office in Hamden. I'm talking like 20 years ago. And it seemed to me the Democrats were dominated by a conservative faction. And I'm watching in recent years, and it's just feeling a lot more like New Haven. I see the Bernie Sanders faction, Josh Elliott getting elected, the kind of indivisible group getting strong. They have the Hilltop Brigade going to other towns to elect liberal candidates. And I'm seeing very few, especially the state office, but also to the mayoralty, I'm seeing very few Republicans in serious contention.
I agree.
So I am right about that.
Absolutely.
So how'd that happen? Did someone get into the water and drop like liberal pills, or what happened?
Well, I think, we haven't had a Republican mayor since 99.
And who was that?
That was Barbara DiNicola.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Remember her.
So it's been quite a number of years. And the council has been predominantly Democrat for longer than that even.
And what's the makeup now?
Well, we've got 2 seats, myself and my...
Meaning Republicans?
Yes. 2 seats out of 15. So
does that mean that you have to divide up being on every committee? Is it like New Haven where you have to make sure there's a Republican on every committee?
Yes. And I am on every committee.
You know what they did in New Haven is that we have 30 alders, and there haven't been any Republicans for years. So what they do is they designate one of the Democrats to be the pretend Republican on the committees and giving the Republican speech.
Well, we have to have, in Hamden, we have to have 2 minority seats.
Oh, you have one of those laws like Hartford.
Yes.
Oh.
So we have the minimum right now of Republican representation.
Because you remember in Hartford, they had that rule, and the Working Families Party got the slot, and it was Democrats.
Yep.
And I wonder whether a leading party can just easily have one of their people register or something else and have them get it. But I guess that doesn't happen in Hamden. You're real Republicans.
Correct.
Oh.
We worry about that. We worry about the Working Families Party being the minority party, and the Republican Party being a non-entity. That's a concern for us right now. We do have a new chairman, Frank Lador, and he's doing his best to bring in younger Republicans who want to get involved. But it's become almost an exercise in futility in Hamden. So we don't have the energy when you're out of power for so long. You just don't have that kind of energy and excitement for getting involved in politics. It's been a real challenge.
So why do you think it is? I doubt it has to do with the political acumen of the Republicans who get involved. I'm guessing it has to do with where Hamden went. Because as I said, I remember the kind of conservative Democrats who held sway. It really has become much more of a liberal town, hasn't it? Especially the southern half.
Yes, I would say so. Yes, I think some of that came out of the energy from the 2016 the national
The Bernie
election.
Sanders.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that the anger at perhaps the Bernie not getting a fair shake at the primary really created a lot of an energy and anger among the more liberal base of the Democratic Party.
And a younger base.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and I also just wonder, Marjorie, most of our lives we've been told all politics is local. And I still think that's largely true. The biggest thing is if even your congressperson is going to help you deal with a problem with the utility company or your local government before, it's about the trade treaties. But some have argued, a lot of experts, that there's been something of a shift that we saw in 2018 and maybe partly 2016, where maybe in some ways all politics is national. Because I think, I was telling you before the show, and again, it's not that I'm so smart, and I clearly wasn't in this case. I was pretty confident a Republican was going to become governor. Republicans were going to take one house of the legislature in last year's election in the state. And instead, it was a blue wave. And it was clearly, we couldn't find as reporters a single person who was really voting for Ned Lamont. Everyone we talked to was putting in Ned Lamont because they were mad at Donald Trump. And it seemed like all over the country, and partly he's a polarizing figure, but there's a greater polarization that's occurred even before Donald Trump in this country, do you think that's part of what happened in Hamden? You just have people who are just national liberals and Democrats?
Yes, I do. I mean, I've talked to Democrats that would never pull the lever for a Republican in a national election, but would be more inclined to in a local election. But Donald Trump really, it was, I call it Trump derangement syndrome. But he is polarizing. He is, he says things that are not presidential, that are not softened. He just kind of says whatever comes into his mind, and he's very different from what everyone's used to. But I think there was a backlash, especially here in Connecticut, and then in Hamden itself, that this was a never Trump vote, and I was really disappointed in the election for governor. People were upset with Malloy. That was clear, and it looked like the momentum was on the Republican side. Connecticut has voted for Republican governors in the past, but this
just as much as Democrats in my lifetime.
Yes, absolutely. But
Malloy was the first Democrat in 20 years to be governor. Yeah. Yep, you had Lowell Weicker.
Yeah.
You had Jody Rell.
Yeah.
You had John Rowland.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Very
Marjorie,
true.
but we also agreed, and I agree with everything you said. Before that, this was already happening in Hamden for a generation. And I wonder if partly this national polarization has to do with the parties themselves nationally. So traditionally in Connecticut, the Connecticut Republican Party was a pro-choice party, a pro-environmentalism party. Stuart McKinney, Weicker, people like that. I remember Julie Balaga. Remember her? All these Republican politicians took the lead on what used to be New England Republican issues. Environmentalism, even civil rights, was originally a Republican issue in our country.
Yes, absolutely.
And I know there is a tradition of Black Republican participation in Hamden, whether it's Brian Anderson, Brian Green, people like that, who are visible. So I'm wondering also if Trump accelerated a deeper trend where the national Republican parties move to the right has made it hard for local Republicans like yourself in Connecticut to get some of the support you might have used to get in the past.
Well, I don't know. Can't agree with that completely. I think we're seeing some movement in African Americans with this. There's a Blexit movement with Candace Owens. Are you Candace is actually a Connecticut resident, and she's going around the country trying to wake up African Americans to think for themselves and to not just vote in a Democratic, bloc that they've traditionally been voting for years, because there's, their lives haven't improved. The communities haven't improved. There's still immense poverty, failing schools. These things that were promised for decades from the Democrats have not really proven to have been, any improvement in their lives. And so there is a little bit of an awakening, I think, going on in the Black vote. You saw a little bit of movement for Trump in the Black vote and in the Union vote in 2016. So I think there's an economic message that Republicans are giving that the Democrats failed to give in 2016, and I'm hoping we're going to see a little bit of a change and shift in those voting habits.
All right, and you're listening to Marjorie Bonadies, who is the Republican Minority Leader, i.e., brave person on the Hamden Legislative Council, and she's here joining us on Dateline Hamden, WNHH FM, your home for community radio 103.5, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. So, Margie, one thing a Republican does, after we've had all this gloom and doom, let's talk about the positive of what you can do as a Republican. You have guaranteed seats on the council. You've been on the council now how many years?
This is the 6th year.
So you serve an important role, I would argue, in that you can give a different point of view when proposals are given, and that a lot of proposals aren't even liberal versus conservative when you have local government. You just need somebody watching who's not in to give a different point of view. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I do try to, maintain the two-party system with robust debate. I think we need to have those debates. I don't think we should all, march lockstep with each other. There's always two sides or more to any situation. And I think it's important that there's people on the council that are going to offer those.
And just from reading the articles in the Independent, I noticed that sometimes you're on the same side of some Democrats raising questions about issues who are very liberal. And the big issue for local people in Hamden, it seems, is taxes. So that's certainly not a Bernie Sanders issue, when you talk about national stuff. Right. So one issue I saw you giving a different point of view was the passage last week, I think it was, of a ban on single-use plastic bags at stores. So starting soon in the fall, I believe it is in Hamden.
Correct.
You will not be able to get a plastic bag when you buy stuff at the grocery store or
anywhere.
Anywhere. And that they're not going to be able to suggest, correct, that you get a plastic straw. But if you say, I want a plastic straw, you can get one.
Yes.
Right?
So it's not necessarily a ban. It's a little bit of an infringement on free speech. But if you want a straw, you can have a straw. Just have to ask, Mother, may I?
Now, you had also been against the plastic ban. What was your argument?
I was only because the bag that was acceptable with this ban was the paper bag. And the paper bag is not a better solution for the environment, if that's what the concern was. The paper bag is it's very intense, resource intensive. It requires a lot more water. 14 million trees a year are used to create paper bags. More costs in transport of paper bags. The same amount of paper bags with plastic takes 7 trucks to transport paper, 1 truck to transport plastic. So I was against the idea that the paper bag was going to save the environment where the plastic bag was going to destroy the environment.
I guess one argument you get back on that is that, I think that's a very good argument, by the way, is that the real answer is reduce how much you use. When I go to shop every week, I have a bunch of canvas bags I used for years. Some people say, well, canvas takes a lot of work too and it's dyed, but I really use them for years.
Yes.
And I realize that's not going to be a mass solution. I occasionally do get plastic bags and I'm on my way and I try to reuse them, but I only reuse them once. Do you think there might be because there are problems with plastic in the landfills, in the oceans, that they don't degrade and they do poison our water and kill a lot of marine life. Do you think a good solution is, or is it realistic in any way to be promoting the use of reused canvas bags?
Well, canvas, cotton also has its environmental impacts as well. Cotton is a very thirsty plant.
But you reuse the bags.
Yes, you do.
But you
That's
still
the key.
But
That's the key.
But you think that
how many times you reuse.
Yeah.
So I do too. I use canvas. I use bags that are given by some of the retail stores now. I reuse them all the time. I think canvas, it has to be used 131 times to offset its environmental impact. The paper bag 43 times. The plastic bag, actually, you talked about reduce and to reuse. The plastic bag, they call them single use. I don't think there's anything single use about plastic bags. People use them to bring home their groceries. They carry 2,500 times their weight. Then they're put into garbage liners, pet waste.
Right. Wouldn't you agree it's often like a once for use? Like for me, it's bringing my lunch once, or it's, my
Right.
friends use it to clean up their doggy poop.
Right. So if you're reusing plastic bags, they're not single use. The true single use plastic bag is the garbage bag that you're going to buy to replace that bag with, whether it's a bin liner or something else that you're using plastic for. So you're just replacing one with the other. And the other.
Well, reuse again might be the answer there, or reduction. So there, I compost a lot. And
I do too.
So
nothing decomposes in the landfill. Nothing, not even paper bags.
right. So I would say that I have like one small bag. Our household has one small bag a week of regular garbage, although that is in a plastic bag.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. What was I going to say about that?
Well, you're a composter too. Do you have a bin in your backyard?
I do. I have a big area that we compost in. I've tried the bins. I've tried the rotating.
Now, so we have a big pile out front, but we had roots growing in it because we weren't turning it enough.
Yes.
So now we have one of these plastic rotating closed containers. We put the compost in where it breaks down in there. What happened is that our neighbors didn't like. We also had an area like you described, and our neighbors weren't happy because animals were coming to eat, which I thought was kind of cool. But I understood their concern. So what do you do about that?
Well,
we're getting the nitty gritty here.
The plastic recycling with the crank, it got too heavy with water.
It does get heavy,
and I broke the crank that didn't work.
We don't even have a crank. We got to like jump up and move it over.
So I do, as I said, I have this area, and we cover with leaves and grass and food, and
you don't get the animals.
I do, but I live in a wooded area. We have all kinds of animals.
And that's part of the natural cycle, isn't it?
Exactly. It is.
I mean, again, I don't have your command like you were just giving the numbers of how much stuff's reused and the environmental issue. I'm not that much. My wife understands environmental stuff a lot more than I do. But I know that spiritually it feels really good for me when I'm reusing the most of my waste. Now, I don't eat meat, so that makes it easier. But to compost so much and to use canvas bags, I just feel, and it could be a total delusion because a lot of commentators point out that there's a problem with this sort of people feeling self-satisfied we're saving the planet because we didn't take a plastic bag today, but meanwhile we're driving 50 miles or taking jet planes, So there is that trap that you think with your little steps you're saving the planet without changing the underlying issues. But I do know it feels to me spiritually satisfying to compost and reuse canvas bags and reduce waste because I kind of feel like it's part of a larger quest to leave my imprint on the world where I've taken less than I've given.
I agree. I can agree with that. I mean, I
like. Why did you start composting? Why do you use
I'm a
canvas
gardener.
bags?
I am a huge gardener, and I have to feed my tomato plants. That's very important to me. And then I can them, and I use them throughout the year. It's just a wonderful thing that I love to do. Not everyone's going to do that. Not everyone's going to behave in the same ways. I'm very, very thrifty. I wash out my Ziploc bags.
That's partly what I'm about too. Yeah,
I wash out straws. I don't like to use straws. I haven't bought a water bottle in probably a decade.
Yeah. Well, that gets me mad too about water. Why we're not just using our tap water in places where we live, like where we're lucky enough to live, not like Flint where the water's good. It's better than tap water.
Right. And so I carry a Yeti. I've carried the same Yeti.
What's a Yeti?
Yeti is an aluminum
my wife's got one
military grade drinking cup. It doesn't sweat. You can leave it on a wooden table. You're not going to get a ring. I've been carrying it for 5 years. It keeps ice about 24 hours. So if you like I like ice, cold water, it keeps your water cold for over 24 hours. It's good stuff.
So Marjorie Bonadies, we're having this conversation now about why you oppose, someone who composts, who carries a Yeti, who believes in reduction, uses canvas bags, why you oppose this ban. And that really leads me to a larger question about how do we deal with climate change, how do we deal with environment, or how do we deal with other social challenges that the Democrats believe often in requiring affirmative government action, like banning something or, taxing, which I think, some experts agree with that. I'm not saying they're wrong or right. I think what I might be hearing from you, and tell me if I'm right about this, is that a more effective way is to create incentives.
Yes.
To help people to really promote canvas bags. I know some stores, give you a break on the cost if you reuse a bag, things like that. Is that where you're coming from, Marjorie Bonadies?
Yes. I mean, they don't give you a break anymore. They used to. If you bring your own bag, they was like a 5 cent. I don't know why that changed, but with this
But I'm
ban,
talking about the larger concept.
yes, but the ban and tax that we're doing now, this was an overhead expense for grocery stores to buy plastic and paper bags, and I'm afraid that overhead expense is now going to be transferred to the public because they're not going to offer the plastic bag anymore. They're going to offer the paper bag, which it's more expensive. It's a 5 cent versus 1.5 cents. They're eventually going to either raise the grocery prices or they're going to charge per bag. And I think that's a lose for the public and a win for big grocery.
What about this larger issue of how we address social goods? Like, so if people can all agree we'd rather that we don't have the planet blow up, we'd rather not have plastic waste all over the place. A better way, specifically here and more broadly with environmental and health concerns, how do we do it if we don't tax people or ban stuff?
Well, I don't think we can ban ourselves out of a littering problem. And littering has been an issue for, decades. As long as I've been alive, Do Not Litter was a huge campaign. And
the Native American chief with the tear coming down.
I mean, it's just you look around at your environment. You don't want to see garbage and litter all around your town. But I prefer the carrot over the stick. I don't like the heavy hand of government.
What would be the carrot with littering? Because actually, in New Haven, we have not figured out what to do about littering.
Yeah.
We can't find people. You can't get most of the people. You can do public education. It's not getting most of the people who litter.
Well, we do have programs in schools, so kids will come home and they'll say to their parents, "This is what we should do."
That's true. In New Haven, they had this one program where they hired teens for the summer to clean up the neighborhood in New Hallville and Dixwell, and also they became ambassadors for their peers.
Right. We need to have more public places to throw garbage. We have the bike path that comes into New Haven, comes through the whole town of Hamden. We need to have receptacles available there.
Then we need to have
throw
people
things out.
throw out. They need to clear those, and that's one place where I would argue maybe Republicans don't always support tax revenue to pay for people to work to, let's say, clean the garbage cans, right? If the Parks Department doesn't have enough people, unless you could say you can raise it philanthropically through the Canal Trail Foundation, is that something you might prefer?
Yeah, we have a Clean and Green Commission in Hamden. We have a new solid waste and recycling coordinator, and we have a litter enforcement officer.
The urban miner guy.
Yes, the urban miner guy.
Yeah.
I have yet to meet him. I would love to get him into a room and come up with ways that we could really reuse our litter. In fact, I came across an article in the New Haven Independent about the women in Tower 1.
Yep, you're using the plastic bags
Yes,
and making the...
that is great. The win all the way around. We've got women who are coming together and forming a community, solving an environmental problem, and creating a product that's, useful and, out of otherwise discarded or landfill plastic bags. So I love that article, and I brought that up on the town hall meeting, the council meeting, when we talked about that ban.
All right. You're listening to Marjorie Bonadies, who's the Republican minority leader. Yes, Republicans do exist, and in her case, even hold office in Hamden in 2019. Marjorie's here on Dateline Hamden, 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. Let's move over to some other issues. So there was a case where you offered a point of view that actually, when we did reporting on this, your point of view echoed that of African Americans in general we interviewed. We decided to go to stores around Lower Dixwell and in Hamden, and to a person, they were very skeptical, shoppers and store people, for some of the reasons you raised, whether it was going to work. That was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I asked for an environmental impact report also to see a year after the ban takes effect if there's been any change in litter.
Does that mean you're going to get that report? Do you have that power as a...
That's another story. But
what do you mean? Like, can you? How did you ask for it?
I would ask to see if the ban was effective, in which the purpose was to save the planet, very broad, and also to reduce waste and litter. So I want to make sure that we're passing laws that are actually effective. And I want.
But how do we measure this? Like, do we measure litter, or is it more anecdotal? Like, I don't see it as much in my street.
It can be anecdotal, but I think we can measure it. If the litter that's picked up by some of our commissions, we have, as I said, the Clean and Green Commission. If all the litter that's picked up, and we say what percentage of that litter is due to plastic bags, we can measure whether but you'd have to do it now before the ban goes into effect.
But also,
we'd have to do a study now and a study.
If you have more non-plastic litter in a year, Sorry to interrupt you, Marjorie.
It's okay.
If you have more non-plastic trash, the percentage might not be relevant. Wouldn't it be more relevant? Couldn't you just have a hearing? Do you have the authority as minority leader to just hold a hearing and bring people in a year later and just anecdotally? Do you see as much plastic to bring store owners in, to bring clean and green team in? I mean, do you really? Because I'm skeptical of the accuracy of data on this as opposed to we just kind of see it. If you're picking up trash around town or you're in the parks department and you're running the parks or you're the Greenway Trail, you could tell, can't you?
Yes, I think you can. I mean, I'm a bicycle rider so in the warmer months, but I look at trash all the time as I'm riding on many streets in our town. And the number one thing that I see on the street are the little plastic flossers. I don't know if you've seen those little
Oh
plastic
yes, single use.
with
That's so weird about it.
with a
And the
little
dentist office gives you
floss.
that, yeah. But why would you buy floss to use once?
Well, they're in you use them when you're in the car after lunch, whatever the case may be. But I
But you're
see
buying a
hundreds
whole,
of
and
them.
you're seeing it. Aren't you just using that device once, that plastic
Yes,
holder?
yes. You floss your teeth. There's a little pick on the end. You can use that to clean your teeth, and then out the window it goes. This it's more a culture of littering than it is.
Yeah.
And this is a plastic. The flosser is also plastic.
What are you going to do about the flossers? Come on now. The pressure's on. You're the minority leader
Well,
of the Hamden Legislative Council.
Can we just ban everything we don't like? I don't know. I don't think we
But
can.
would you want to ban single-use flossers?
No, as I said, I think we just have to really, elevate people's awareness
Mhm.
of litter and make it easier to get rid of things in the proper way.
Yeah, and more receptacles.
Yes.
Margie, I wanted to ask you about a big controversy in Hamden. Was Channel 8's reporter Mario Boone obtained a pretty disturbing body cam video. He had a police officer at a traffic stop approaching a car with people who are Latino. One didn't understand English, said so at least, and this officer didn't believe him, was harassing him, and then threatened to call Immigration and Customs Enforcement on them if he didn't start talking. And what did you think when you watched that video?
Well, when you watch that short clip, it's very disturbing. Police work is not for everyone. It's gritty. It's real life. The majority of people don't want to be exposed to that close up, so it is very disturbing. It wasn't necessarily a traffic stop. This was a police officer came up behind a vehicle at a red light. The vehicle then sped off. So it wasn't. They weren't being pulled over for a traffic violation, but they ran through a red light to avoid being near a police vehicle. The police vehicle followed the car to a residence, and so despite attempts to have the car pull over, so that the person was avoiding police officers. And you have to think what's going through this police officer's mind as they're getting out of their car. Every time they get out of their car and approach a vehicle, they're taking their lives in their hand. And I'm sure on the way there, as you're getting out of the car, you're imagining the worst. So yes, there's this police officer, I'm sure, was on edge. He told the driver to throw the keys out of the window, put his hands out of the window so he could see his hands. And he did say, if you do anything I tell you not to do, you're gonna get shot. He made that clear.
What do you think about that?
I think it's harsh, but I think he's thinking, I want to go home tonight. I want to go home to my family. And when you avoid a police officer's command to pull over, you're bringing that cop one step closer to feeling that his life may be threatened. So I'm trying. I don't want to make comments. This is under review. This is being investigated. I think it's prudent to not make a judgment on this before the entire video has been seen, and I do understand that is available on the New Haven Register site. But it's also going to be investigated thoroughly at the state level and with our police commission, and I will refrain from making judgments until that is done.
And that's a very well taken point. We've been through a lot of these arguments in New Haven. Sometimes I feel like Hamden's starting to have a lot of debates we had in New Haven as Hamden evolves as a city. So your points are well taken. Cops are often misunderstood. The totality of incidents sort of give you more insight. But I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here, okay?
Sure.
As someone who's covered a lot of these, So I have found that a lot, and I happen to really like police officers and the ones I know. And it's important to understand what they face and the risks and why they might behave a certain way. We also give them the power to take away our lives or our liberty. And they are trained to be able to handle situations better than the rest of us would if we felt our lives might be in danger. And that is pretty dangerous to society if police officers are not trained to handle those situations well, so that while an officer might have a reason to believe he might be killed, doesn't mean he should therefore shoot somebody.
Correct.
Which has happened. And you could, in addition to understanding where the police officer is coming from, now you got someone in a car who doesn't speak English, and now all of a sudden could get shot because the officer doesn't realize he can't speak English, or in this case, doesn't believe it. So my concern is when the public, out of really necessary appreciation for the job that cops do and understanding for the risks they undertake, and not wanting to blame them or simplistically look at a snapshot of an incident.
Mm-hmm.
So often, especially police departments, have excused behavior that makes it really dangerous for the public, and that doesn't help police officers become safer cops to themselves more than to the people they're policing, because there is this blue line behind which police officers band together anytime there's criticism. Like the police union here immediately defended what this officer did. Why can't you say sometimes that we don't want our police threatening to kill some people without any evidence that their life's in danger? That we don't want them to threaten to call immigration on Latino people. I mean, do you think there's some basic positions like that that might make more sense and that might even keep police safer in the long run?
Yeah, I think you need to have trust with the public, police officers, and to that end, they do a lot of public outreach. They do a ton of community outreach. I'm actually was surprised at how much time they spend trying to improve relationships with the public and youth, the community, and that they're serving in. I think that's. I don't think people are aware of how much police officers
I know they
are
do a
trying
lot,
to
and
do
they're a good
that.
police force. But now you got a growing Latino population in your town, including a growing undocumented population. This is, I guess, a loaded question. Do you think an incident like this, when someone does threaten the person's life, when they can't speak English and threaten to call immigration, is going to make it harder for that population to trust the police and work with them when they're victims of crime?
That's a tough one. That's a tough question. I don't know.
Because New Haven, even at first the police were reluctant to deal this 15 years ago. It is now an article of faith that it's dangerous when the immigrant population doesn't trust the police and think they're going to deport them, because often immigrants are preyed on by criminals who know they're scared to go to cops because they don't want to get deported. And that the efforts that New Haven police have made to gain the trust of the immigrant community have really helped reduce crime, especially in Fairhaven.
Yeah, I can absolutely agree with that. I know that the police would often need the help to solve crimes of the immigrant community. And I know there people may not come forward with information because they're afraid that their immigration status will be called into question. So that's not clear. Threatening to call ICE, it's not very clear at the state level whether that's permissible or not. Being a sanctuary state has really no legal meaning at this point.
Right, that's true.
So I think.
How do you feel now that you have an immigrant population that's grown in your town? How do you feel about? Would you follow New Haven's policy where cops are directed not to ask about immigration status unless it's directly related to the crime they're investigating?
Yes, I would. I would.
So you would support the New Haven police policy?
Yes, I would.
And what about calls now to have a civilian review board in your town?
Well, we have the police commission is the civilian review board in Hamden.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they make up the Hamden residents, and they do review.
That was actually my argument in New Haven during the debate. I thought they have subpoena power already, the police commission, and back in the 70s they did a really groundbreaking investigation into police misconduct with illegal wiretapping, but it doesn't act like one now. And I wondered whether the answer was to have it act like more of a CRB rather than create another one.
I think they should. That's what we do in
These
Hamden.
are tough issues here. We're talking about them with Marjorie Bonadies, the Republican minority leader in Hamden. They're also there have been issues about budget a lot in your town. The last fiscal year, a deficit was closed by sweeping bond funds, which I
Yes,
guess is, and this is something you've talked about, I read in The Independent, where you look at bond money you haven't spent, money you've borrowed to, let's say, fix a bridge. Am I saying that right? Or,
correct.
do something with capital
Capital
improvements.
improvements,
And
yes.
if money has been spent, use that to close an operating deficit. You weren't keen on that, were you, Marjorie?
I was not keen on that, but we had cuts from the state mid-year, and we had to close about a $9 million deficit. So, we can blame the state, but we don't have a rainy day fund. We're not operating with excess funds that we can close budgets of this type with that much of a deficit. Um, so I wasn't in favor of that, but the alternative was a huge tax increase.
Or
I don't.
what about major cuts?
I'm always looking for cuts. I think we should have all the government we need, but only the government we need.
So when I talk to your counterparts, Republicans in towns like Brantford and Seymour, they have zero sympathy for Hamden and New Haven because they say we knew mid-year we weren't going to get the money we were hoping, or that they even said we were. So in Seymour and Brantford, they budgeted to get less from the state than they're anticipating. But I guess in other cities, Hamden and New Haven, they say we have a lot of tax exempt property, we have a lot of social challenges that those towns don't have, and if they tell us we're getting a certain dollar figure, we're going to budget for that. Where do you stand on that?
That's a problem with budgeting. We often tend to overestimate our revenues, and so I understand not having sympathy for Hamden. We have a huge debt service that we have to meet every year, and that's from decades of not funding things properly, not funding our pension obligations,
So what's the
and
way out of that? Because Hamden's not alone. I'd say basically the whole country has cities and states dealing with that.
absolutely, I really think we're going to have to renegotiate. Excuse me. Um, the retirement packages, which we have done. We've limited the COLA adjustments, that cost of living adjustment for retirees, at this point, for 1 to 1.75 from up to 3%.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
Hamden
3% was in an era when we had more inflation than we have now.
correct, but the wording was up to 3%. And
Oh.
what had been done for decades was every year 3% was given.
Even if inflation didn't rise.
Was just
And some
given
people
every
say
year.
that they use the wrong measure for inflation. That where real inflation occurs that affects your paycheck isn't the same measure based on the price of consumer goods the way it used to be.
Well, talking about consumer pricing
It goes
index.
as
Yeah.
consumer price index to say
Yeah.
is not necessarily the best index for COLA. But now we're getting the weeds here.
Yes,
Yeah.
but we are basically pinning the cost of living adjustment to the CPI.
And I also wanted to ask you, Marjorie, is how you felt about the recent decisions by the town to close 3 schools in southern Hamden and to create an extra grade at the middle school. How did you feel about that whole process? That was a once in a generation redistricting. It had a lot
Yes.
of debate, but it kind of ended without big protests. Or I mean, there was concern, especially about Wintergreen School, but
Right.
and some people felt like, why wasn't this part of town? And there was some crazy state rules about what made it unbalanced school. You had one school with the most racial diversity in the state, but because it was like evenly distributed among four
Right.
great grades,
Well,
4 groups, it was considered not balanced.
right, because they look at white and non-white,
Yeah, it's really
and
crazy.
which I think they're hopefully going to change that, because there's so many other minority groups that it was perfectly balanced. There was 25% black,
So,
25% white,
so a
25%
rule that was
Hispanic.
designed to promote diversity eliminated diversity.
Exactly.
What about the overall plan? Do you think the town handled it well?
Yes, I do. It's never easy to close schools and have students have to change locations. Nobody's going to be happy in any of the scenarios. There's always going to be a couple of groups that we're going to feel that they lost their neighborhood school. But it's a overall redistricting, and it's a huge undertaking. I'm on the school building committee, and so there's a lot of moving parts. There's 2 new schools. We're gonna build a new school at Westwood School. We're going to close Helen Street. We are going to I'm sorry, Church Street. Helen Street's staying where it is. We're talking about making some intradistrict magnet schools to help promote some racial diversity in these schools. by making them the programming more desirable to hopefully draw other students to those schools rather than busing students. So there's a couple of different ideas that are going around to help these schools be more balanced. But I did talk to some of the parents in the Church Street and Helen Street neighborhoods, and they really like their schools.
Right, they're saying
to
we
reflect.
don't need to have our kids sit next to more white kids. We like a good school in our neighborhood.
Exactly. And they want their schools to reflect their community. So they weren't happy either with the state's idea that they needed to have more white kids in their classrooms in order for them to get a better education.
One of the ironies of which there are many. School desegregation.
Yes.
Marjorie, Bonadies, before we let you go, thanks for being on Dateline Hamden here on
Thank
WNHH.
you for having me.
So have you been a Republican your whole life?
No.
Did you grow up in Hamden?
I grew up in Cheshire, but my family is from New Haven.
Oh.
All Democrats. So
how'd you end up in Hamden, and when did you become a Republican, and how?
Wow. I became a Republican just by self-learning, reading, really looking at the issues.
What age? You were like 18 in college and read Ayn Rand, or no?
No, I wasn't a Republican until probably the late 90s.
Okay, you're a latecomer then.
Yeah, I was a latecomer, and the people who are latecomers are really passionate about why they change parties. Yes.
So what got you to be a Republican in the late 90s? That was after the Reagan era.
Yeah, I didn't vote for Reagan. I voted for Clinton. I guess my husband was probably introduced me to Republicanism. And then after 9/11, that really solidified things for me in my head.
Why?
I really felt that we really are standing in the world, how we were dealing with foreign policy. It just I'm a freedom lover. That's my main thing. I love freedom and liberty, and I could see that the Democratic Party was looking for ways to legislate my liberties, and I became very defensive about the Second Amendment, the First Amendment.
Do you carry a gun, or you have a gun?
I do have my permit. I do not carry a gun. I'm not comfortable with that, but I am comfortable with doing the training and defending the Second Amendment at all costs.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you had this evolution in your late 30s.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Maybe children, maybe being a mother. Just things changed for me all of a sudden.
So I'm going to take a wild guess here. You don't support the proposed new tax on soda in the state, instituting tolls for legalizing marijuana, or maybe the third?
Let's see. I don't believe in taxing sugary drinks. I mean, I really just don't think we should be legislating behavior. I mean, you can get in New York, you can't get a 64-ounce soda, but you can get 2 32-ounce sodas. So that doesn't make a lot of sense for me. With a straw, if you ask.
And also two plastic cups instead of one.
Right. It's wasteful.
So are you saying there's sometimes unintended consequences to
Always.
idealistic liberal policies?
Always.
Interesting. Okay.
100% of the time.
All right. Well, I'm 100% grateful to have been able to spend this hour with Marjorie Bonadies, the minority leader of the Hamden Legislative Council. What a pleasure to chat with you today, Marjorie.
Thanks you. You as well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.